Hello, my name is Bryce Spencer Jones. Hello, my name is Bryce Spencer Jones, and I'm host of the Unstuck Yourself podcast and also the moderator for today's discussion on how to offer emotional support to people in need. Um, First off, I want to thank Harvard Chan for putting this event together and for our partner, Active Minds, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting mental health awareness and providing resources for support. They emphasize on mobilizing youth and young adults and reducing stigmas by encouraging open conversations around mental health. And I also want to say that this was made possible by MTV with their support and interest in the importance of mental health. So I think it's safe to say that we've all gone through something at some point in our lives, whether it's struggling with mental health, losing someone we love, or even being overwhelmed with life and what's going on in our lives. It said that we all need support, and um, it said that 80% of young people end up in the last 30 days, they've said they needed support at some point in their lives. And 90% of them have gone to friends for support. But the problem is that a lot of them don't actually feel fully prepared to give high quality information. So that's why I'm excited to have this conversation today because we have two amazing guests who are going to be able to add their own expertise to this wonderful conversation, this important conversation. First off, we have Dr. Jacqui Sperling, who is a clinical psychologist um, and she's a faculty at Harvard Medical School and the co-founder of the McLean Anxiety Mastery Program at McLean Hospital. She specializes in implementing evidence-based treatments and working with youth who present with anxiety disorders and OCD. And then we also have Q Garcia, who's the lead content specialist behind Ask, which is Acknowledge, Support, Keep in Touch. And he has a background in social work and leadership development, which he has expertise in direct practice, trauma-informed care, where he focuses on integrating evidence-based practices along with youth collaboration into his content creation and design. So I want to thank both of you for being a part of this conversation. And first off, I'm going to go to Jacqui with the first question, which is, why do you think so many young people need support today?
First of all, thank you so much for the kind introduction and for having me. And also, I really appreciate the emphasis on this topic because it's really important. All humans need support. We have for many years congregated in communities and benefited from support from each other. And it's also a way of strengthening connection. So in terms of making yourself vulnerable, you can strengthen a relationship and give someone an opportunity to be of support for you. It can help manage our distress, and peers in particular, youth seek their peers in particular, because particularly when you go through adolescence, your peers become much more important. And so they may then seek each other for support versus any other person in the community. And it's an opportunity to strengthen a relationship and show someone that you can be there for them. There are so many stressors in one's life, and even more so nowadays. And I think for youth right now, there are additional demands for them. So there's even more of a need for support.
Yeah. So I think for both of you, to anybody who wants to answer this question, what are some hesitancies or like different stigmas around just offering support for somebody in need?
Yeah, thanks so much, Bryce. I am really excited to be having this conversation and diving into this, and especially diving into what might be some of the barriers kind of at the start of this. I think something that I found and that Optimize has found in working with youth and talking to them is that a lot of us want to support our friends. That's not necessarily the barrier. We want to be there and show up and effectively communicate that we care and see the mental health struggles or see what someone's going through. But sometimes we get caught up on the words is one part of it, is really feeling like maybe some perfectionism or pressure that we're gonna mess up how we provide support and somehow derail, really feeling like responsibility and ownership over the person's well-being versus seeing themselves as the supporter and the person going through it in the driver's seat. Something else that we've heard is people feeling like they that it's not as important to give emotional support because they can't maybe solve the problem directly that their friend's going through. So if a friend's going through something really hard, they're like, what's the point of talking about it if I can't change the circumstance? And what I'm really excited to share and emphasize is how emotional support actually does change your brain and change how you feel supported, and would love for Jacqui to share a little bit more about some of that as well from the impact it does have.
And so I'm happy to go into there. So there's this tool when I recommend it being the first line of response when someone is expressing an emotion or sharing something with you, and it's called validation. Not your parking ticket, it's validation in terms of how someone is feeling. And it's going to sound super basic, and it's actually way harder to implement in the moment. So validation is acknowledging how someone is feeling without agreeing or disagreeing. You're showing someone that you hear them and what they're experiencing makes sense. Now, why is validation important? It's a communication tool. Again, as I said, showing someone that you hear someone. And when we feel heard, our ears are more likely to open up and hear what the other person has to say. It also opens the door for communication and expanding upon someone's experience when you then start to acknowledge what they are experiencing in that moment, and they can add on what might be contributing to that. And again, an opportunity to strengthen that connection as well. It also is an emotion regulation or management tool. And how does that work? So don't have to memorize this, but I like to give the information just for your reference. There's a part of the brain called the amygdala. It's the size of an almond, but it packs a big punch in terms of sending signals of fear and rage. And there's this thinking part of the brain called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. And there's a pathway between the two of them. And it's the thinking part of the brain's job to tell the amygdala to simmer down and to modulate its firing. And particularly for those struggling with some mental illnesses, that pathway can often be weakened, or often for some people, they don't know how they're feeling. However, identifying how you're feeling or having someone else identifying how you're feeling can help strengthen that pathway over time and help reduce the firing of the amygdala. So it's really powerful tool that can actually impact the brain and one's emotion regulation system. Also, when you acknowledge how someone is feeling, again, that may settle them because they feel heard. When we don't feel heard, we may feel compelled to escalate. So how do you validate? Now that we're talking about why it's important, there are different ways to validate, and I'll give some examples. I encourage you to be tentative. I'm sure we don't want to presume we know how someone is feeling. So you can say, you seem really mad, or I wonder if you're worried, or just describe what you're seeing. And then they can clarify whether you missed the mark or not. What you're showing is that you're trying to be there for them and to connect with them. And then they can let you know whether that's a fit or not. So say someone comes and says, their best friend started spreading rumors about them all over school. Now, in that moment, although it comes with kind intentions, your knee-jerk reaction may be to say, forget that person, they're not a good friend, or you have 101 great ideas of how to solve it, right? Really kind intentions. And in that moment, if you say, forget that person, you're minimizing or dismissing their experience and saying, you shouldn't be feeling this awful about this, right? They're not that important. Or if you jump to problem solving, you're saying like, let's make this feeling go away. When what they really need to do is sit with that feeling, acknowledge it, and work through it. And they may need you to be there with them while they do that. So how do you do that? You can say, of course your feelings are hurt. You're feeling so betrayed, right? You want to get really specific. You may have an urge to say upset, but help them identify the specificity of the emotion. Angry, mad, sad, worried. It could be a combination of some. You want to get it specific as possible, though. And sometimes you just validate and you leave it there and create a space for them to share more or just sit with you. And you also may have some really great ideas of how to work through a situation. If you're feeling compelled to share, what you can do is validate first, always make that the primary response. And you can say, I have some ideas of how to work through this. If you would like to hear them, let me know. And that way, you're creating the space for them to come to you with ears open when they're ready. I don't know if you ever had this experience of ever feeling like, you know what, I'm in the hole, not ready to get out of the hole. I need to sit in this hole for some time first, and then I'll work on getting out of the hole, right? Some people are not ready to do that. And you want to make sure that their ears are open to hear you, and then they're coming to you asking for those ideas. So that is one way you can just validate. Sometimes you can add on that you're there to offer support should they want it. Sometimes you want to show that two things are true at the same time. How do you do that? Say someone comes and says they're really frustrated and disappointed about how that soccer game went yesterday and they're at practice at this moment. You can say, you're really disappointed by how that game went yesterday. And now this is where you're going to go against all your grammatical training and you're going to replace one conjunction with another. And before I give an example of how you do that, I'm going to actually put you on the spot there, Q, if this is okay. But Q, if I were to say, you're really disappointed that you didn't get that job, but there are other jobs out there, what do you hear?
A dismissal of how I'm feeling that sure, yeah, sure, I can be sad for like a second, but I should just like be hopeful and look towards the future and ignore how I'm actually feeling.
Exactly. What the but does is it wipes out everything. So, Bryce, if I say you did 99 things well in this project, but this last one needs work, what do you hear?
I heard, but it needs work.
Yeah, you don't hear the 99 things you did well. Exactly, right? So subtle. What you're going to do is replace but with and. Makes a big difference. You're really disappointed in how that soccer game went. And I think it's really impressive that you showed up to practice today to try hard to work and improve for next time, right? You're not dismissing how they're experiencing, you're acknowledging how they're experiencing first, and you're also holding the other side of what's happening right here and now. So, more to say about validation do's and don'ts, but want to pass it on for the next question. We can expand upon it later too.
Yeah, and
No, I love that about
sorry.
sorry.
Um,
I loved what you were saying about just the and in the but. That's something that I always try to do is just like if I say but, I immediately just stop and I'm like, wait, and
Good
you can
catch.
it's so important.
And we say but so commonly in the lingo. You notice
Mhm.
you're maybe sending a text to someone, you'd be like, delete, delete, delete. And it can make a big difference.
Yeah. Sorry, you can say what
no,
you were
thanks,
saying.
thanks. Yeah, I really love everything you laid out, Jacqui, and it's something that whenever we're kind of thinking about what do people need and what do young adults need to effectively provide this emotional support. That's exactly how we came up with the Acknowledge, Support, Keep in Touch acronym. And I love that Acknowledge comes through so clearly. And um, what the acronym is really there for is for whenever you're trying to remember all these great tips is like, okay, yes, acknowledge is first. No matter what, I need to acknowledge the person first. And then support is really recentering what support do they need from me and putting them in that driver's seat instead of kind of exactly what you said, assuming that I know best. That's something I think we all can fall into. And we might not know, like you said, we might think that um the problem or solution looks so clear from the outside, but really what makes a huge difference is feeling that validation. And if anybody wants to dive deeper into all the nerdy parts of how it impacts your brain, the toolkit has some really great research for you to go and dive deeper into how it really does make an impact. And we might not see that impact on the outside or even in the moment. I think often we think that emotional support has to lead to the person feeling better or changing how they're feeling, going from sad to happy. But really, we want to try to shift to think about feelings as more neutral and that you're just there so that they feel supported, regardless of what emotion is coming up for them in that moment.
Yeah, especially with what Jackie was saying too, with like leaving the door open, it's huge. Like somebody might not feel ready to talk, and just leaving the door open, and being like, "Hey, you might not be ready to talk now, but like whenever you're available, whenever you're feeling that you can talk about this, like I'm always here for you." And it's so important. But I know as far as like there's a saying it says, "Don't overflow your cup." Basically, like if you want to help somebody, you can't overflow, you can't pour into somebody's cup if you don't have enough water, I guess, to pour into their cup. So like, what is the role of emotional capacity when it comes to just offering support?
I love that, Bryce. And I think there's a lot there. And we can kind of like get into some of the foundations and just kind of tips for whenever like we're navigating it in our everyday life.
Mhm.
Um, First is that just really understanding what your role is to your friends. And it can look really different than maybe what you'd expect from a clinician. Like you're not a clinician and you don't need, unless you are, but to your friends, you're not playing that role and you don't have to take on the responsibility of whatever outcome for whatever's they're going through. You're there to provide that validation and really understanding that that's your role. and feeling comfortable in that role and knowing that there's other resources and other supports that they'll need, not just you, is really important to not getting overwhelmed. I think the second part is we get scared a lot of times to set a boundary around emotional support, thinking, oh, now my friend will think I do not care about them and I do not see and hear them. And what I've really learned in my own journey is that setting boundaries actually gives the other person clarity that your yes is meaningful and that they can trust your yes whenever you actually practice saying no. So if you're somebody who's like never said no, then I kind of have to guess if you're comfortable or not, or if you have time and space and capacity, versus me telling someone, hey, I hear you. That sounds incredibly hard, and I would love to talk about that more. I've had a really rough day and don't have space right now. Can we schedule some time next week? Now they know when I come and show up next week that when I say yes, I am fully here. They don't have to guess. They can trust and know that I will say no when I need to and be honest about my yes. And so it makes it all more powerful and even creates that connection. And something that you can even practice with your friends is like celebrating each other's no's. So if you're wanting to get into this practice with each other, is whenever your friend says no or like cancels plans, being like, yes, you needed to take that time off. And like, I'm so like, thank you so much for being honest with me and just helping reinforce in your brain, giving yourself some of that positive feedback. If you're doing it by yourself, like, give yourself a sticker or get yourself a treat for saying no. Just you really we're encouraged to say yes to everything, that you might need some of those external validations for yourself, that protecting your own time sets you up to be a better supporter going forward.
Yeah. I don't know if Jackie, if you had anything you wanted to add to that too.
Thank you. You said that very well. So nothing to touch upon what you shared, just thinking about also another piece is that if you're noticing that you're feeling like the giving tree, that story where the tree just kept giving and giving and giving and also not necessarily getting in return, just making sure that there's a balance in also your relationships, that like if someone is seeking support from you, are they also there for you? And if you're noticing yourself feeling pretty burnt out and fried, that may also be a cue to you to think about how can I make sure to recharge my battery or refill my cup on a more regular basis as well, so that I can be more available when someone is needing something with me. There are going to be those moments, and Q says, like, it is really important to recognize, I'm not in the space to do that. And I want to show up for my friend in a way that I can, and be there for them in the way that they deserve. And those moments will happen. And there may be cues for yourself to think about, maybe I think about stuff on a more regular basis of how to make sure that my cup is refilled regularly.
I feel that, especially as someone like I consider myself a huge introvert. So I love what you were saying about just coming back later whenever you say like I don't necessarily have the space right now, but like tomorrow I'm 100% free and I could give you like all my time. Um, but I think that I love what both of you said about it. I think especially when it comes to setting boundaries, family can be a little hard of a topic. So how can families better support young people or just like people in general, for both of you, people in their family, while also setting those boundaries and to anybody?
So in terms of us, I think that when a parent or a caregiver is trying to offer support to someone who's, a child, for example, or even an adult child, that dynamic is very unique and special and is very different than when you're trying to offer support to a friend. And so we're going back to the tool validation. I was mentioning, an encouragement to be tentative, like you seem, I wonder if, and it is especially crucial for parents to do that. In our lexicon in our community, we have been socialized that with peers, it can be helpful to make them feel less alone, to say, oh, I totally know how you feel, or that happened to me, right? They may feel less alone in that moment. It is very important for parents not to say, I know, or I understand. And there are multiple reasons why. So for youth who are going through adolescence in particular, they are in a developmental stage where they think their experience is unique and no one knows what they're going through, and particularly not their parents. They're also tasked with separating and individuating, so being different and separate from their parents. So if parents try to connect with them and say, I know or I understand, they're likely to bristle because no, you don't understand, you're not me. That also speaks to another piece. Again, I said, like, we are socialized this way to make people feel less alone. So this is not to make people feel guilty. You're doing what you have learned. This is a very unique relationship with a parent and a child, though. Think about refraining from sharing your personal experience that may be connected to theirs. Be like, oh, I know, I feel like when I was your age, this happened to me. And there are multiple reasons why to refrain from that. One, it takes the shift off of them and puts it on you. Another is that even if you say till you're blue in the face that they could never disappoint you, right? You're always proud of them. They may be feeling ashamed in that moment because you somehow were able to get through that and they don't yet see the light in that moment. They just see darkness. And so they may feel ashamed. They may feel like they're disappointing you. So it's really important that you keep the focus on the youth and not make it about you. Should they come to you and say, hey, did this ever happen to you? Now you have an invitation to share. So that's important just in terms of like parents or adults offering support to youth, creating a space, being open, being curious and non-judgmental. Like, I noticed this, or I wonder if you think that you're going to judge them, they likely are to shut down, or that you'll punish them and they're less likely to share. So it's really important to create an open and non-judgmental and not shaming space that they can share with you, and be tentative. I wonder, you seem, I imagine, you do not know, you do not understand. They will tell you very clearly, or they may see the inside. It may leak out in another way. And actually, you had also mentioned about boundaries. So I want to give Q a chance to speak too if you're interested about how to set boundaries with family members. So I'll pass it off there.
Yeah, I'll speak to a little bit of what you said about how it applies to peer conversations too. One thing that, like, if you're somebody who maybe loves to tell like your own experiences, or you kind of see the connections often of like somebody went through something and you see how you also went through it, a practice of kind of like shifting how you approach it is giving them the option and just saying, hey, this like sounds like something I went through. Is it helpful for me to share? Or I can also like share later, no pressure. And just that might help, kind of, instead of expecting yourself to totally change how you talk and share. And like sometimes it might be helpful, but the number one focus is on them and them leading what is supportive for themselves in that moment. And who knows, they might like later on be like, hey, actually now I'm in a problem solving stage. You mentioned you went through this. Could you help me with resources? But in often in that moment, you, no matter how similar your experiences are, you can't know exactly how it's feeling to them. And that's the same with the parent-child relationship. You could go through the same, two people could go through the same thing together and have very different feelings in that moment. So that's why you might just decenter and like save it or give them the option, but leaving space for the feelings instead of the problem as the initial focus is like number one. And those are going to be different from every single person.
So
And
as
I'll
a, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
I was going to leave it back to Jacqui for the boundaries. I'd love for you to talk more about the family boundary part as well.
I'm sure, but I wasn't sure if Bryce, you wanted to say
No,
something first.
I'm open to you saying that.
Well, I think when if there are family members who you feel like are sharing to the point where it doesn't feel like a fit, like if it's sending a signal to you, like, I feel like it could be a parent who is leaning on a child, it can be like a parentified child where a parent is suddenly sharing more with their child, that maybe, time for them to think about like, like, how do I come up with a way to advocate for myself in a respectful way and like help them also get the support that they need and deserve from like other adults. There is a tool, and I will be able to do it justice, but there's an acronym called DEARMAN. It's a tool from actually dialectical behavior therapy, and it's how to advocate for what you want and need in an effective way. Now, just a heads up though, even if you nail this tool, you can't guarantee how someone is going to respond. Dear is what you're saying, and man is how you present. So D is describe the facts. So you can say like, I noticed that after work, you will come to me and share, what your experiences have been like, and they list off what has been happening, or share your conflicts with dad or whatever it is in the family. And then E is express how you feel. Like, that makes me feel really stressed or worried or sad or, and not sure how to, be supportive of you while also maintain support of dad. And I feel like I'm in the middle. A is assert what you want. It would feel really helpful for me if those conversations were left for adults and not shared with me so that I can actually keep my relationship with both of you consistent there. And then R is reinforce. What's in it for them? Why should they do that? I will be less likely to lash out. I feel like sometimes I've been noticing myself lashing out at you or being short. I'll be more likely to be respectful. It will strengthen our relationship. So that's the dear. Man, I maintain mindfulness, stay on topic. A, appear confident. N is being willing to negotiate. This can be for other things, willing to give to get. Maybe not in this context for this topic, but there could be some other times, particularly if like youth are trying to ask for later curfew or things like that. And so there may be times of willing to give to get. That's the dear man. That's one way in terms of advocating for yourself to ask for boundaries, but starting off with describing something that they can't discount. Because if you just say like, you're leaning on me too much, they could say, no, I'm not, because that's subjective. So describe what you're saying, express how you feel. They also can't challenge you and say you're wrong for feeling that way. Your feelings are how you feel, and no one can challenge those. And then let them know what you do want and what's in it for them.
I
So I
love
know we've talked a lot about offering support to other people, but if somebody is having a hard time communicating that they need help, like what's a good way, in your own opinion, um, that they can reach out to somebody that they care about, or sorry, to reach out to somebody that cares about them, that they know that they can get support from them, or how do they ask for support?
I love this question and a big emphasis on the ASK acronym. And I'll also plug that May 16th, we'll have some really cool digital experiences where you can kind of practice these items. Something that I really want to emphasize is that emotional conversations don't always just start, or emotional support doesn't always just start when someone's struggling. So the validation piece applies for everything. Let's say your coworker got a promotion and you didn't. You might have different feelings than they do. They're happy. Starting with that validation and centering them when they're coming to you and sharing exciting news, like celebrating them and decentering yourself for the moment. And of course, you can move to you in enough time. These same principles establish that trust and establish that pattern of support and validation and seeing each other over time. And so that's a big part of like keep in touch is like it's not enough to do validation and to acknowledge just once and then now you're a trusted friend in person. It's really about like these small everyday ways we can see people and see their feelings outside of just the big stuff. It's seeing people and not necessarily having to have a big conversation or something that feels really heavy to make that first connection. And so the reverse, like what you're talking about, where maybe like somebody doesn't know how to, like, I'm struggling, I don't know how to talk to somebody about this, like just reaching out to hang out with somebody and spend time and connect with them, regardless of if you actually get to like bring up what you're going through in that first hangout, that is co-regulation. That is spending time together and building the space of trust and building the space of acknowledging boundaries, being truthful about what you're available for, getting to know the person and their own patterns. And so I think that that's somewhere we can get stuck is feeling like, I'm like, now I'm not feeling great and I have no one around me. And that's something that I think we can deal with for so many reasons. But just thinking about how can I show up and people show up for me in those little ways, that's all going to build to then being there for you whenever something big happens. And so really not feeling that pressure that you have to reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling with this huge thing. Can we talk about it? It can just be, hey, I've been down lately and I really need a night out. I really need a movie night. I really need to go for lunch. And even if you don't talk about it, it's going to make a difference in you feeling supported and seen.
Yeah, I love literally everything that you said. I know we have to get to the Q&A, so there's time for one more quick question. And I know Q, you touched on it a little bit. But I just wanted to ask, like, on another perspective of somebody who is having somebody go to them and they might not feel prepared? What are some like first steps they can take in order to just offer support to somebody?
Well, that's a great question. I think something that's also important to notice is first self-validate, right? We're thinking about like to validate someone else. You want to make sure that you're in a space to respond to someone. And if you're like, oh, that caught me off guard, or, that's really frustrating for me to hear, but however you're feeling in that moment, keep it on the inside so that you're in a space to then respond to someone. But if someone caught you at a time where you may be running off to somewhere or you're not in a space to respond, how do you then like really acknowledge how they're feeling and still be there for them to like, so you can validate their initial experience, however they're feeling, and say like, this is really important. I want to make sure that there's, we do this justice and I'm there for you in the way that you deserve. I will be free at this time later today. Would that work for you then to do that? So that you're not like, if you're like, whoa, I was not, expecting that, and you were running off to somewhere and they caught you off guard, first validate your own experience, then validate their experience and check in with them. And just like you had mentioned, like you want to let them know there's a time where you're going to be more available. And it actually is like, again, like what's in it for them when you're thinking about back to that dear man is like, you're going to be more present for them so that they can actually get your full support in that way.
I love that. Q, if you want to add anything else, I know like your last answer, you included a lot of good answers for this question as well. But if you want to add anything before we head over to the Q&A too.
Yeah, I'll just say like forgive yourself for and make space for yourself to pause when you need to. Like I'm thinking of whenever you were describing that, Jacqui, about check in with yourself, like, oh my gosh, I just got like thrown off and I'm thinking of these other things. That's when we sometimes accidentally will say something like, this is all too much. And then that communicates that they're too much, when really what you mean is my brain is processing too much information and I need to pause. So instead, starting to build those practices of, oh my gosh, so glad you came to me. Let me just take a second. Okay, now I can respond. And normalizing that for yourself, forgiving yourself for that. And that models to them that if they need to do the same thing, that that's normal in front of you to take a pause when they need it too. And so remembering that giving yourself grace is going to then set that model and expectation for others around you.
Yes. And excellent points. And it'd be okay, Bryce, to add in one piece just in terms of support in general, like where we're also thinking about boundaries is that, peers play a pivotal role in providing support for others. So important. And so important for them to be able to show up in a way that their friends need them to. It's also important to think about like, where is that line in terms of them providing support, and when is it more appropriate for them to be seeking support from professional or adult? And so it's really important. We're also teaching youth like how to show up to be a good friend and support their friends, to know that should their peers tell them anything regarding safety concerns, so if their friends have any intent, they've been harming themselves, cutting, burning, they have intention to hurt themselves, an intention, excuse me, sorry, to hurt or kill themselves, those are not conversations that a peer should take on. They initially validate and then make sure that their friend is getting connected to a trusted adult or getting connected to support, right? To make sure that someone who is qualified and can hold that information can be there for that individual. And that's not something that a peer should take on. And that you're not being a bad friend if you are redirecting. Sorry, Leonard. That's all. We're getting to me.
Yeah. And I'll
No,
say like for 18 to like if you're over 18 too, it can feel like, oh, like before 18, I knew I needed to like escalate to an adult. Now I'm an adult. What do I do? You still aren't responsible for safety. And if there's ever a safety concern, great resources like 988, and that's also referenced, and 988, you can go to their website, Lifeline, Crisis Lines. All of those have done a great job having lots of different ways for you to connect your peers to support, and really just asking them, how can we make sure that you're safe? And then really acknowledging in yourself and to them that you can't provide that support. So even if you're not a youth or a young person and anymore, you're still not at any age responsible for like a safety concern that still needs to be escalated to a professional.
Absolutely. And for those who are unaware, that 988 is the mental health crisis emergency line. So it's the mental health version of 911. And if it's immediate emergency, also the emergency room. So that was the other piece. Thank you for it to add is that like, no matter what, that's not your role unless you're that person's clinician, that you're providing that peer support. You're just going to making sure that like a trusted adult can help get them to a safe place in terms of that. That's also an issue to monitor.
No, I love the both of you for your answers. Like you're so just in depth and it's amazing. But I think that's all the time we have for this conversation. I do want to head over to the Q&A. First off, I want to thank everybody that was able to make it to this conversation portion. I know we have a lot of people that are probably from different time zones in different countries, so it's amazing that you all were able to make time to be here today. I want to thank Harvard Chan for putting this event together and also Active Minds and MTV for also taking part in this conversation. As far as questions, I think we have about like 15 minutes. The first question would be to anybody that wants to answer. It's going to be, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to emotionally support a family member but does not agree with the direction or decisions that that family member is taking and or making?
That's a great question. I'm sure Jacqui has a great in-depth answer. I'll say, I think that's really complex in the sense that there's a lot of parts there where it's not only the support you're giving, but the role you're providing. And so it sounds like in that question, what I'm piecing a little bit is that it's not only like, how do I support them in terms of making them feel heard and validated? But it sounds like there might be other things going on where you might be taking a caretaker role, might be put into that position. So I think that acknowledging that you're not responsible for others' lives. That's one thing. Take that pressure off of yourself in this part of it. And that if you do feel that responsibility and pressure, there might be some additional support you need in identifying your role in that relationship and clarifying that with the person.
I think that's very well said. I would just think in terms of, when I if someone is not agreeing with this, but validation is showing you're not agreeing or disagreeing. And if you're concerned about that someone, I always encourage you to lead with concern or worry versus the judgment of their decision, right? So if you're concerned about anyone about what's happening, you want to lead with that, like, I've been noticing this and, I'm worried about you. I wanted to check in kind of thing. If they're coming up with ideas of how to solve something and in your mind you're like, oh, that doesn't seem like that's going to go in a helpful direction, what I might suggest is like have them let you know like what is their goal, have them brainstorm all the different ideas and like, oh, like let's think through like what do you think would happen with each of these options, and then you're like, which one do you think gets you closer to your goal? Because if they think through like, oh, like maybe that wouldn't end up the way that I had wanted, then you're sort of guiding them to get to maybe the place that gets them closest to their goal without saying like that's a terrible idea. So you can use it in a way that's supportive and be like, sure, like that's thinking about right. What's important to you? What do you want to have happen? What are the different ways you could do that? They're like, oh, I've got it. I've got an idea. You're like, that is an idea. Absolutely. Let's think about all possible ideas. And you know what? Have them put all ideas on the table before you evaluate them. Like, all right, let's think through what could happen with each of these. And then have them, if they're willing to do that with you, you're like, huh, which one do you think gets you closer to their goal? You're like, okay, not the first one I said, this one, and that can help them do it again without you just shutting them down.
Yeah. So the next question would be, are there any suggested evidence-based curriculums that you are aware of to support high school students?
That's a great question. So first I'll say that Active Minds, please check us out. We have a great high school program and we have great high school curriculums where both like high schools can sign on to get more resources and bring the curriculum into their schools and really do these like community-based learning experiences. So please check us out. And also I'll say that when you're looking for resources and evidence-based um, programs, that really looking into what the need is, like really investigating what the need is for your group or your high schooler, or if you are a high schooler, like looking into what the need is and then going from there versus kind of thinking like, oh, all high schoolers would need the same exact program or intervention. Like sometimes it's something deeper than just mental health. Sometimes it's bullying, sometimes it's something more specific. So just a great practice when you're looking into evidence-based stuff is you might have more success the more specific you're able to get to match the need.
Yeah, so just going to say, great points, that dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, has come up with modules that have been delivered in the school setting. And DBT is based on, several different core skills. And one of those is interpersonal effectiveness skills. So not only advocating for what you want and need in an effective way, but also like how to take care of your own needs, how to be there for other people, just all that communication. The other modules are distress tolerance, like how to handle in a crisis moment, emotion regulation, an everyday way to manage your mood, mindfulness, how to stay in the present moment. So those are all important techniques for, youth that they can use. And I often find that like if you're human, that can be helpful. Some of those modules are specific to just in terms of interacting with other people.
All right. So next question would be how do you heal in order to be able to give more than take from another person? And then says hi from Spain.
Hi, hola. So I'll say that the idea of being 100% healed is maybe not possible, right? Like all of us are humans and all of us are maybe on our own journeys. And so I just think that for myself and something that I found really helpful is that goal of like, I need to be this level of healed to be able to show up for my friends, for them to be able to show up for me. Like healing isn't a linear process. There's going to be times when you feel like you're regressing. There's going to be times when things are coming back up. And that maybe isn't the goal is let me get 100% healed so that I can make sure my relationships are perfectly 50-50 balanced. Like I'm a person who loves that concept. And so my brain and my logic brain, like what Jack was talking about, goes to that. And instead just giving yourself grace to know that you're not going to be perfect. Your relationships aren't always going to be 100% balanced. And it's about finding what's working for you and developing those cues that tell you that something's off and feeling that like, oh, I'm noticing this pattern. I'm noticing this in this relationship. We can't, there's not really a way to say, here's exactly how to do this perfect. It's all about those like developing those connections over time and really identifying where those gaps exist already if you're feeling that imbalance in your relationships, like taking each one as its own kind of thing and then looking at yourself broader and where do I need more support? What more support do I need? And where do I need more support from others? And then where can I give maybe a little bit more support or where do I have space to and to grow those connections in the way I'm ready for?
And
Yeah,
I
I love
might
what
have
you were saying
misheard.
about checking in with yourself, like making sure that you have the space for it too.
And I might have misheard the question. They said to have the space to give more than to take. Was that the wording of
Yeah,
the question? I think it's also important that like it should be an imbalance, right? You want to make sure that it's a balance with your relationships. And as Q mentioned, there are going to be times where you need a peer more than they need you in that moment, and then the reverse, right? We're not going through things at the exact same time. And so that balance will shift just in certain moments, but overall, it should not be that one person is taking more than the other, than the other one is. It should be overall balanced. And that can be something if you start to evaluate your relationships to think, are there some that feel imbalanced? Now, keep in mind that if it's a parent and a child, that, for example, is a parent is there for the child. It's not that the child has to be there for the parent in the same way. That's unique. When you're thinking about peers, then it should be more of a balance.
yeah. So I have another question. It is any suggestions on how to apply this to our sorry. Any suggestions on how to apply this to our workplace relationships, for example, to set boundaries in a work environment with your boss?
Mm.
I love
Well,
this question too. We've been talking about it a lot at Active Minds as we have a workforce development program and what our workforce program is really focused on is like Gen Z and young people in the workplace. And something that we really like, I want to emphasize is that again, this is going to look really different with your boss than it is with your coworkers. And so really remembering that in your relationships, if you are the boss or if you are the employee, that dynamic, the same dynamic Jacqui's been talking about, is going to look different when there's a power imbalance. The way you can think of it is that we're talking about here decentering the problem and centering the feelings. If you are someone who is in a position to change the circumstances, or you're the reason for the circumstances, that's why that needs to be brought back in a way. And of course, the validation is still an important part of what that'll look like, but just taking that pressure off of yourself that you need to be perfect at setting boundaries, because again, that's like a two-sided relationship. And so you can set boundaries and they still be crossed. That's like something I really want to emphasize, is that if things are like not feeling balanced, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just bad at boundaries. It could mean that you're in a workplace that doesn't respect them, or that this dynamic and somebody else needs to intervene. So just taking that pressure off of yourself that you're doing something wrong if you feel like there's not a space for good boundaries in your managerial relationship.
And I also think that validation applies to all humans, right? So it's not just outside the workplace. So you can validate, in the workplace as well. And if someone you find like keeps coming to you to share, but you have a deadline and you need to get things done, that can be where you use the tool to really validate their experience. Say you want to hear what's going on for them, and you have this deadline, so you'd be happy to talk to them after you get it done, and think about ways to negotiate those conversations in a way that feels supportive and respectful and also validating.
All right, so we have another question, which is, what are some strategies for navigating when a friend doesn't want to get redirected to a professional?
In terms of they just want to keep talking to you and doesn't want to get help from a professional. I'm not sure if they've elaborated. It just say, I think
I would say if maybe both, like if you can, or whatever one you feel like you can give an answer to.
No, I think, you can really validate, maybe what are their concerns? Like some people may feel weak by needing to go to a provider. Some people may not know where to go or know how to find one. So maybe finding out like what might be the barrier to them seeking support. Again, be curious and non-judgmental. Like, I'm wondering what's your hesitation to seeking support, because it may be like, I don't even know where to turn, how I find one. Then that be another way that you can, help get them connected if or so, for example, you can redirect them to their primary care provider, internist. There are also resources online for you don't have to know all of them, but they can look online. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America, for example, has resources for people in the community. So to get them, that may be a way to get them connected. It could be the stigma piece. It could be they're like, oh, but you're so good at providing support. I just want to keep talking to you. And in that respect, you want to let them know that like our friendship is so important. I do want to be there for you. And there's only so much I can do as a friend. There are some pieces like where there's a limit, and I want you to have that support that you deserve. And so I feel like I only can do this much. And then beyond that is where like you deserve that additional professional support, because I would be doing you a disservice. And so really not making it, instead of saying like you're too much for me, you're acknowledging them, you're setting that limit, and you're also letting them know it's from a place of like you wanting them to have the support that they deserve. And at the same time, you're also respecting your limits and boundaries.
And I'd say something else that can really help take that responsibility and pressure that you right now hold this person's safety in life is to figure out what networks are you connected to? Are they connected to? Like, if it's a peer and you're younger, like, is it sometimes there'll be times when you need to tell a trusted person, like a teacher or their parents or your parents, like, and that's okay. And whatever happens as a result of that isn't necessarily your fault, and you might not see every impact of it like the benefits of that right away, but just taking that pressure off. And if you're somebody who's like in college or who's over 18 and you're like, well, there's like, where's my trusted adult that I can tell, and you're feeling really like stuck and alone, figuring out who else is in their life that maybe you can say, can we talk to your other, like, can we have like a friend group meeting about this? Because that's one way to help, again, address some of those things Jacqui was saying about stigma as a group, using all of your brains combined instead of pressure that you are their person and their life is in your hands. Their life isn't in your hands. Like, that pressure being taken off of you and just having additional supports to handle the situation means that you don't have to think that you have to be perfect and figuring it out. You're going to collaborate together. And that's also the piece, is like, instead of it being, I think you need to call 988 and they're saying, I don't want to. It's let's collaborate because I don't feel comfortable providing this support and you don't feel comfortable going to my suggestion. What is a way to make sure that you're safe? Let's think of some ideas together and brainstorm that together to make sure that you get what you need in a way that works for you, but that I can't move on being your only support because that's my boundary. So I think like a little bit of that negotiating can also be part of it. But again, just like anytime you're able to bring others in and handle it together and build those like communities together is going to be a lot less pressure on you to have the perfect answer.
Yeah, so I have one more question. It is so we've talked a lot about validating and offering these spaces. So what is one way that we can do this without coming off as accusatory or just like putting all like say if it's about somebody like you need support on something that like somebody's doing to you, how do you go to them without being accusatory of it?
Oh, so like in terms of you're really feeling the weight of their interactions with you and feeling like what would be the solution would be for them to work on themselves so that it doesn't have an impact on you. Is that maybe perhaps the
Yeah,
interpretation of
because
my
we talked a
question?
lot about just like supporting one person and like getting support. So I was thinking on like interpersonal, like between each other.
And so this is, a really, if you were to go to someone and be like, you're really making me want to pull out my hair, or you're making me lose my mind, or you're really driving me up a wall, or I can't take this anymore, or you're suffocating, like all those things going in, not so likely to make someone want to seek support. And understandably, you're having a lot of emotions about it. So what's really important is that you lead with concern, right? And just in terms of like, again, like, I've been noticing, for example, you seem less happy. You seem maybe like more on edge. And I've noticed maybe like sometimes maybe like a little bit shorter in your responses. And, I'm wondering for you, like, I'm wondering, how you've been doing. And so again, leading with concern, and then that can open a door for you then to pursue and see like, are they open to getting support? Because that in turn could ideally help improve your relationship as well. You just want to make sure that you're not going to them and telling them that they're the problem. Not that
I,
that's what you're insinuating, but
and I love thinking about it too, of like, again, not just emotional support for a really big struggle, but embedding acknowledgement and validation and letting others lead in all of your conversations, then you already have that foundation for if a conflict comes up, if something happens, you've already practiced that of acknowledging and validating each other and saying, it sounds like you've been feeling like this. This is how I'm feeling. And you're both practicing. So I just love that idea of like, okay, yeah, we're providing support when things are hard, but also like showing up consistently, regardless of like the feeling, is the most important thing to set the foundation of connection and to really feel connected for regardless of if they're having a bad time, if y'all are having it together, to still just have that practice of validating and acknowledging and saying, this is how it sounds like you're feeling and giving them space to then clarify, like that is gold that you can use in any of your conversations in like all parts of your life.
Perfect. I think that's all the time we have for today. So I want to thank both Q and Jacqui for your amazing answers for all these questions that I put on you today. I want to thank the Center of Health Communication and Harvard Chan School for and also Active Minds for hosting. And I also want to thank MTV for your support for this conversation today. As far as actions to take, you can check out the toolkit that we have. You can check out Ask and Active Minds. And that's all we have for today. So thank you, both of you, to for this conversation, this wonderful conversation.
thank you so much. And thanks for your facilitation.
Thank you.
Thanks for everyone who logged on. Shout out to
Yes, and
y'all,
thank you
made it
for
possible.
coming.